Hi, welcome back to the shed for episode 20 of the Thinline base build. And in this episode, we're going to continue with the neck and install that mother of pearl inlay that we so delicately cut last week. This is even more delicate. Last time we spent what seemed like an absolute age getting this mother of pearl inlay cut out, and it actually was quite a mission. There was a lot of work to get this cut in one piece without breaking it, but I'm really happy with how I've managed to do it. I've kind of been around and I've smoothed the edges out a little bit because there were a few little inconsistencies, but I'm generally very happy with it now, and we're at a point where we're ready to get it installed into this headstock. But before I do anything with that, I just want to fit the tuners again, just to make sure I can position it nicely, taking into account the kind of washers and stuff that go around these tuner holes. So we'll move that to one side. I'll very quickly off camera get the tuners installed and we can have a look and see what we're looking like. And I think once we position that kind of in there, I think that looks about right. So I'm going to put a couple of marks in. So that'll give me an understanding of where it needs to go. And I'm going to stick this down just with a little bit of super glue. However, I've done this job before, sticking stuff temporarily down onto rosewood, and rosewood reacts with super glue. Something terrible. And I don't want to get caught out by sticking this down and not being able to get it off, because that has happened in the past, I won't lie, and it's a nightmare. So I'm going to leverage the old super glue and masking tape trick. The next step of this is basically just running around this with a very sharp scalpel blade. So it will just cut through the masking tape. And I'm just going to put the least amount of super glue I can get away with. Just on the back of there. I'll position that back up with my marks. Just leave that to set up for a few seconds. And while that's drying, I'm going to get rid of this blade in my scalpel and put a nice sharp new one in. Now the inlaying process for this headstock is going to be very, very similar to the process I used on the fretboard markers. Obviously this is a lot more delicate, but other than that it should be pretty much the same. I'm going to carve around with the scalpel to give me a mark that I can work to. But the only difference is I'm actually going to remove the waste with a Dremel this time. It is far too delicate to really do by hand with a chisel. So the Dremel is the way to go. However, that does introduce a few kind of complexities of its own that we'll go into when we kind of get to that stage. So I'm just going to get this into the vise, get it nice and secure so it's not going to move around on me. And we can start marking it out. And like I say, it's just a case of very delicately at first, just tracing round the shape of this. But unlike when I did the inlays on the board, I'm not really trying to kind of cut too much into this. This is just marking it. And not trying to kind of create a stop cut that I'll chisel to. This is a slightly different technique. The Dremel will cut it in a different way. It's very, very difficult with this capital C because it is quite flexible, really, and I don't want to flex it if I can possibly help it, because I don't want to snap it off. And I think we're pretty much there, so I'm just going to kind of cut that off and just get rid of the masking tape. Now, one thing I have found doing these in the past is that it's very, very difficult to see what you're doing just based on that. You've got to have everything in exactly the right light or you can't see it. But I am going to try something new on this one, and I'm going to try getting a bit of this yellow into there, like that. And I think that's going to give me a much better idea of where I'm going. That looks pretty good. So I'm going to put my inlay safe to one side somewhere, and we can break out the Dremel and get this carved out. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm just going to use my Dremel with a tiny, tiny little cutter in there. I mean, they're probably less than 1 millimetre in diameter. I think some are smaller than others, but the one I've got in is about 1 mil, and I think that'll be absolutely fine. And I've set it depth-wise to, it's kind of just about the thickness. Ideally, I'd want a little bit of mother of pearl poking out, but not too much because I don't want to do a lot of sanding. Now, I think the challenge here is going to be A, me seeing what I'm doing, and B, kind of filming this as well. So I think what I'm going to do is bring one of my lights around this side of the bench and get that down low so it's shining directly onto it, and also kind of try and do the bulk of my filming from this side as well. So I'll just get back to you when I've set all that up, and we'll see if we can get this cut out. Okay, so there's the first bit done, and I think it's going okay. This bit is especially tricky, but we're kind of there. There's a few tiny little gaps, but I don't think there's anything we need to particularly worry about. So I'm going to push on and kind of rough out the rest of the word, and then we can kind of concentrate on getting the fine detail done. I think there will have to be a little bit of filling on this, but I'm sure with this rosewood it will be quite a nice decent job, and you won't really be able to see the joins. That's what I hope anyway. And there we have it cut in. There's a few little gaps around there, but there's nothing that I'm massively worried about. So the next step in this is to again break out some super glue and the rosewood dust and get this stuck in. I don't think it looks too bad really. I think we can do a nice job of filling that so it'll look absolutely super. But before I do that, I am just going to mask off the rest of the headstock, just so we don't get it too kind of messed up. And then I've got to very delicately just retrieve that for the last time. And just like we did for the other inlays, I'm just going to put some standard super glue in the bulk of it. Just to stick it in position. Like that. We'll give that a couple of seconds to dry up, and then we'll break out the rosewood dust and the thin super glue. And I've actually left that for a little while I kind of went in and did something else, because it is not particularly warm out here tonight. And I've made myself some rosewood dust. Managed to get some crap in there. And all I'm going to do is just exactly what we did on the last job. Just get it into all those little nooks and crannies. And then again with the water thin super glue, just wick that in all around this. And just let it all soak in. Get this tape off before it all dries up too much, because this will dry very, very quickly. There's some kind of reaction takes place between the rosewood and the super glue, and it'll go off almost instantly. It looks like there might be a little bit of wet left on there, but that will very quickly kind of dry up. And we'll just give that a few minutes and then we can get it sanded down. And that's all nicely dried up now, so I'm just taking an 80 pad at first. And then as we start to get a bit nearer, we'll start to go with finer and finer grits. This is a 120. And I think we can see that that's starting to look really, really nice. There's one or two little voids in there that are a little bit below the surface. So I'm probably just going to kind of add a little bit more super glue into them. There's a couple of little and again we'll wait for that to go off and give it another rub down. And there it is, kind of all rubbed down, flushed off and looking lovely. There is a little bit of a shadow around it in places, but I think it actually looks absolutely fine. And once you get some lacquer onto this headstock and kind of buff that up to a gloss, your eye will be taken off any kind of the fill that's around there. I've done this a few times now and I kind of understand what it's going to look like when it's finished, and I am very, very happy with the way that that's come out. And there it is, all nicely complete. Put the tuners back on just so you can see what that's all going to look like, and I think that looks really good. I'm very, very happy with it. So once again, we're kind of moving on quite swiftly with this neck. There's only a few more bits and pieces to do to it, but they are quite big jobs. So we've got the fretting to do, and we've also got a carve to do on the back of this neck. However, I think the next job I want to tackle is actually back on the body, because I really want to get the neck and the body united, which means I've got to cut a neck pocket. And I think that will give me an opportunity to have a little bit of a break from working on the neck and do something a little bit different. However, that's all going to be for the future, and I'll be doing that in the next episode, which will be along in a couple of days. Until then, don't forget to like if you've enjoyed this, subscribe if you haven't already done so, and I'll look forward to seeing you then. Thanks a lot for watching. Bye bye.